Now we go back to the Chief Financial Officer's report.
I'm going to overwise.
Look for the
You
calories.
deserve it. You stayed late. You deserve it.
Well, Scott, there's been a couple good reports. Now you ready to rock and roll on yours?
Absolutely.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to highlight the November 2017 financials. The financial reports for the month ending November 30th. This represents 5 months or 42% of our fiscal year. The first report that you will see is the monthly revenue and expenditure report. The key piece on that one, you will see that the bond refinancing is on there and the addition of the new life safety bond and the working cash bond. The following report after the monthly expenditure report is the monthly financial statements. We're tracking pretty close to exactly where we were during our 16-17 budget, which is a good thing. We're continuing to monitor revenue and expenditures coming in and make sure that we're trying to stay on budget as close as possible, lower that deficit gap that we have. Following the financial statements is the revenue expense report from 11/1 through 11/30, highlighting everything that came in for that month and also what is year to date. After the revenue expense report is the student activity summaries report. There is only 2 accounts in the negative out of all of the accounts. We are tracking to make sure that people are fundraising, raising as much money as they can to get their accounts where they're not negative and get them back into the positives. We will continue to monitor the 2 accounts that are negative and see what we can do to help them out to get them back to positive. That would conclude my report. I'd like to go into the questions that were submitted. If Marianne, if you could please go to board book page 24. Okay, the first question submitted was on the revenue for the education levy, which is at the top of the page for prior year. This is FY17 tax collection that came in after June 30th. I'm still anticipating the annual collection to average 98 to 100% of budget. Although the auditor accrues these to the last year's audit, the treasurer operates on a cash basis. So on a cash basis, this should help close the budget deficit gap that we have.
Well, that's the question. Do we, if it's mostly a carryover from what we anticipated being collected during the prior fiscal year, which we were over budget that year too, so the
Yes.
carryover for the year before might have been, but according to this, and they're almost all 107, we're $570,000 over budget. We don't expect a shift in the second collection down because of this, right?
That's another
if it's
time-
basically based on a carryover from the prior year.
Prior year, yes.
We don't expect it to have a significant impact on the second collection, right?
I do not.
What was our deficit for the year then? Do you remember roughly?
It was roughly 93 or 90, I'm sorry, the total, about 340.
So just this one account, it's going to cover the deficit plus $230,000. I mean, again, you can't say everything else is going to fall into place, but since it's our biggest item,
Yes.
in all likelihood, that one single item is going to overcome the deficit that we had budgeted for this year, right?
Correct.
Correct.
The issue that you talked about at the previous meeting is how do we budget for that? And I thought about that a little bit. The only thing is the 4 or 5% that we received after June 30th. So we really only collected in that previous year's cash budget or budget the board approved. We approved it at 98.5.
Right.
We really only collected like 93.
Well, I think the answer.
So we got it late.
But I think the answer is, before we approve the budget, we know how much
cash we've collected from the prior, what we thought was prior that came in this year, and we should probably adjust the budget number for that. Because we budget for our tax collections only based on what the projection is for those two collections that come into that current fiscal year. But before we approve the budget, we've collected all the money from carryover from the prior year into this year. We approved it in October, right?
Yeah.
It has to be
September.
approved before September
December.
30th.
All right, September 30th. By September 30th,
We
we're-
knew.
in July, August, we're 3 months in. We've collected it all, but we don't adjust the then current year budget. And it could be up or down, but the last few years it would have been up significantly for what we know, how much more we collected from the prior year that already in this year. I think that's how we're going to hit it the right way and come much closer on a budgeting plan for that current year.
So the only thing that's weird about that, and I'll defer to the financial guys on the board, is that you are correct. We know that money, so that's cash on hand.
Right.
And the treasurer's office treats us like cash on hand. But technically, the auditor takes that and post-dates it back to the
Yeah,
previous
but
year. But I know it's
we
cash
do a
on
budget
hand.
on a cash basis,
Right.
not on a
Right.
Budget
We
on
do.
cash basis.
But
So
then
that's-
Gary's-
The theory is you wind up double budgeting,
Yeah.
right? You're budgeting in the prior year, you're
Prior
budgeting
year.
in the second, in
And
the
still-
That's what I'm
subsequent
saying. I
year.
don't know if you can do that.
So, you can do it,
Or do we start
the re-
putting our tax, instead of 98.5%, do we budget them at 100%?
Or what
Or
Gary's
101.
pointing out is, because he's right, then really I said the wrong thing, because if that was really true and it was the same every year, some of like this current year money is not going to be collected till next year, right?
Correct.
But
What
that's
I-
not what we've seen, on an overall basis, we've seen higher collections in a given year than what we budgeted several years in a row now.
Yeah, we used to budget at 97. We're coming in closer to 99. So
Right.
that's almost, if you think about it, 400,000, additional 400,000 in tax collection.
Well, I think we should really take a closer look
Look
at
at
it
it.
when we do the budget for next year.
And what I would encourage you to do is to add a fourth line as an education levy, and show that remittance as strictly the carryover type of line item as opposed to putting it into the prior line item.
That's a good idea, I think, because that answers the
Because when
question.
you're gonna, it also will help you when you budget the following year to make sure that you don't inadvertently include.
So you'd have education levy current, education levy
Prior,
prior.
which is that you're doing that 2-year thing,
Maybe we
year
should, can we change it to first, second, and then? do
And then
prior?
have like 10-1114 education levy, and that would be any monies that got carried, that was a timing issue, whatever you want to call it.
Late collection or
Late collection, which fell from the previous year.
Yeah, that might be a way to do it, Scott.
I never understood why.
Because then you
people
could
prior.
technically keep the one at current at 98, I mean, right? You could,
That way, it's clearer to the board to
And you
see
don't-
what we actually budgeted, what we collected off of that budgeted line item. And, because each year it gets buried, right?
Right.
We wind up saying, oh, yeah, we collected 99%, but we actually had monies from the prior year
Right.
into that number. This way, you can clearly see
What it is.
that carryover amount, and it'll help
And like you said,
decisions with the board, and it also will help you from a budgeting standpoint.
in theory, in most years, we're not going to collect.
Because
all.
then you'll know what percent we've collected year to date to know what you're gonna, if you want to carry over an additional amount into next year's budget. Here, right now, we're kind of blinded, we're saying we've got 170.
well, you have a chart already that tabulates the tax collection for the current year. So if you kept that continuous at the 98 or whatever, you actually received July 1 to June 30. And then you could look at the 3-year historical trend of this late number, because you should be able to go back on the treasurer's financial reports
Yes.
and say, hey, we've averaged 200,000 or 300,000 after July 1. So it's
Just give it some thought, because rightfully so for some board members to get concerned about deficit spending. And if you're going to be doing projections that might show that we're going to deficit spend, it's kind of important that, we're 2 years in a row, we're showing deficit spending. As we said, I don't think that's going to happen.
received.
So it's whatever we can do to figure out what's the best way to
Yeah,
show
make it-
this so that because at some point, we probably will get it to where we're gonna have the deficit spend if we're gonna maintain what we're talking about here
Because we
without
use-
doing a tax increase, so,
Just have-
without doing a referendum.
No, absolutely. We want to make it as
Yeah.
accurate as possible.
Yeah.
To reflect exactly what truly we have with what our revenue is versus our expenditures. To see,
Right.
okay, are we truly deficit spending or are we, more closer to a balanced budget? Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Scott, if you go to board book page, I just want to make sure we're accounting for the life safety accurately. Your revenue and expenditure report, your summary,
Yes.
the 5 months, page 121 of board book. The life safety, you have 1,900, that's the new bond money.
1.9 of revenues.
Yes.
And
And then
we
the 3
expended 1,931.
And then the 3 million.
Stay on
is
the
a
life
working
safety.
cash. Oh, okay.
We expended 1,931,
Yes.
and that was for a roof and this summer projects this year.
Yes, that's roof and whatever is part of the life safety for phase 3.
Okay.
So we still have roughly 475,000 of life safety from the old.
We still have, how many payments? We still have one more, we have 5% on some of the projects we haven't paid out. We haven't paid out our last installment on roofs.
And we still have some architect fees.
Yeah, so
that
we're not
are
done yet. We're not closed out
Linked
yet.
to the roof project.
Okay, and you're doing that construction summary for the board in January?
Yes, that will be for the board in January.
All right. Thank you.
And if the roof punch list isn't complete, which I don't anticipate it being, with the weather now,
No, I don't see
we're
that
not
either.
paying that
So,
5%.
so how much should we go in, okay, it's up in working cash is where the 3 million is.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
What were the other questions, Scott?
On board book page 37, under, let's see. It's under the, let's see, where's it at here? I'm sorry.
Stipends?
No, it's under the supply account under 10-1441-40-610, a CTE supply account on the top of the page.
What's CTE?
Career and
Tech Ed.
Technical Education.
Thank you.
These are Perkins funds, which is the federal grant or the CTI state grant. Placeholders were entered in the budget. However, the CTE grant allotments were received after the budget was approved with what final line items will be. Moving forward with this, I'm going to take a 3-year historical trend to try to capture a more accurate placeholder for it so it doesn't look as skewed when you look at, okay, wow, we budgeted this for supplies and it's way over.
But because we're getting funded by the government, it's got to be used for that.
Yes.
You're spending on that,
Mhm.
even though. Okay.
And remember, the CTE, Perkins grant, and CTI are all based on a reimbursement. So whatever you're spending on it, we put in for reimbursement and we get it back.
Next one.
Page 37, under 10, 1500, 1220, 13, 2215. This is stipend for boys soccer. This was a budget oversight. 4 positions were approved in the contract, and the budget only captures 3.
Thank you.
Low, three assistants, one head, increased in level.
Thank you.
And there were no further questions on the financial reports.
Thank you, Scott. What's going to do next?
Is that it? Scott, okay, then let's move down to discussion and information items, FOIA requests.
No FOIA request. The police department radios, no updates on that.
Okay, this is an opportunity for visitor statements. Are there any visitor statements out there? Not seeing any. I will pass on the narrative. Any additional discussion items? Look to my left. Any board members want to have any discussion? Look to my right. None?
Nope.